Glenn Beck program. Tonight, everybody's saying, oh, we've got to do something on the stimulus package. Yeah, isn't this the way we've ended up in this mess? I got a better idea. I'll share it with you in a second. Also, Iran thinks its missiles are fulfilling prophecy. Oh, goody. And the White House has taken control of the census. I'll tell you why this is a bigger deal than most people think. If you believe this country is great, but the government is doing their best just to ram it down the crapper, we're on the same page. Come on, follow me. Hello, America. Tonight's Hot List. These are the stories that the mainstream media is covering. Nissan is going to lay off 20,000 workers worldwide after $900 million in third-quarter losses. The SEC announced they've got a civil deal that's going to force Bernie Madoff to pay a fine and return all the money to the apparent victims of his $50 billion Ponzi scheme. He has the money? Why didn't we do that in the first place? We also don't know why two singers were no-shows last night at the Grammys. Whew. But we do know that Chris Brown turned himself into police after a domestic violence case involving his girlfriend, Rihanna. Wouldn't it be nice to live in a world where the Grammys were the thing that you were really worried about? Tonight, here's what our hot list is. Tonight, President Obama going to try to convince America that his spending package is exactly what we have to do, and we have to do now. But here's the one thing. Since this financial mess began, there have been screams for everybody, do something, just do something right now. But fighting that impulse is often our best move. Boy, don't you wish you had that $700 billion back from the TARP package. Let me give you three examples from other areas of life, and you'll see what I mean. Did you watch 60 Minutes last night? Sully was on, Captain Sully was on. So let's start with an example from an airplane. If a plane is spinning out of control, it's a flat spin, a pilot's natural instinct is to pull back on the stick. But if you pull up, it only makes things worse. Pilots are trained to fight that natural instinct and actually do the opposite and push down on the stick into the spin. That's what will pull the plane out of a flat spin. It's hard to fight the instinct, but that's the only way you'll survive. Second example. If you come up in a car accident, you see somebody who's in the car and they've been in an accident, your first thought is get them out of the vehicle. But if you did that, you might be in trouble and cause more damage. If you really want to help, doctors tell you don't move them, because somebody with a head or a neck injury, you can actually make the injury much, much worse. And this one drives me out of my mind with people who never make a decision. I try to teach my kids this. If you've ever been around people who never seem to want to make a decision, they're like, oh, I don't know, what do you think? I don't know, I just can't make a decision. Well, they don't usually make a decision. They don't do anything. Now, some people would say that they're just procrastinating. Others say that they're being irresponsible. But actually, even though they claim they haven't made a decision, they have. Choosing to do nothing is a decision, and it has consequences. So as strange as it might seem, doing nothing is doing something. And I think it's what we should do right now. I know it goes against your instinct like it does with the pilot, but sometimes you should do the opposite of what people are telling you to do. I have a feeling that when you look at the stimulus package, it's probably a little closer to what your gut says. Well, I don't think we should be doing that. I only wish the government and their progressive friends had learned that lesson before started making short-sighted decisions that will likely turn this recession into something far, far worse. Steve Forbes is the chairman and CEO of Forbes. How are you, Steve?
Good to be with you, Glenn. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, so what do you think? Am I wrong on not doing this, doing nothing, or if you do something, please just give the money back to the people and let them decide what to do with it in their own lives?
Yeah, people will spend the money better than bureaucrats, and this $800 billion or whatever it finally comes to, you know, Japan tried that in the 1990s. It doesn't work. If spending money was the way to wealth, the Soviet Union would have won the Cold War. A better thing to do would be to cut the payroll tax. That way people get to keep more of what they earn, and it lowers the cost of hiring people. Reduce business taxes. We have the second worst among the developed countries. Give people incentive to start new businesses. Expand existing businesses. Cut personal tax rates. Let people do it. And if they want to spend money, do sensible things like update our electricity grid, which is in terrible shape. You do those things, and voila, the economy will start to recover.
Okay, so here's the thing. We've got TARP 2 coming. They're saying now it's going to be another $1 trillion. I've heard people estimate that to stop these banks from going into a spin, it's going to be up to $4 trillion. We have already promised, what is it, $9.4 trillion. That's enough to pay 90% of all of the mortgages in America. At what point, Steve, do people say, wait a minute? Or do they? I mean, I'm trying to figure out the game that is being played in Washington. How long do they think we're going to give them? And how much money do you think we're going to give them before we wise up?
Well, the fact of the matter is there's not even the printing press of Washington can't print enough money to monetize all the assets in the United States, over $100 trillion. It's just not going to work. A sensible thing to do on banks, and this is a complicated, boring area, is to get rid of this mark-to-market rule, which is devastating their balance sheets. Most of their losses right now, Glenn, are book losses, not cash losses. They removed that, and if they'd had that rule in the early 90s, when we last had a bank crisis, we'd have destroyed most of the large commercial banks in this country. So get rid of it. Restore the uptick rule in short selling. You know, if you want to sell a stock short, the old rule says you had to wait till the stock went up instead of gang-banging the stock on the way down. Restore that. You do a few sensible things like that, and a big brand-new TARP really, actually, won't be necessary.
Yeah, well, they're not going to do that. And in fact, let me give you, these are the companies that received TARP money as of January 31st. Can you roll this, please? Watch this list. There they are. And here they keep coming. By the way, this list will run 5 minutes. We will continue to let it run here. Here's the question to you, Steve. We keep spending money like this. Who's going to buy our bonds? Who's going to buy our debt? At what point does China say, you got to be kidding me, you're coming for more, what, another trillion, another $2 trillion, another $4 trillion? I don't think you're good for the money.
Well, that gets to the heart of the crisis. One of the things that made this bubble get to the size it did was because the Federal Reserve was printing too much money 4 or 5 years ago, debasing the value of the dollar. We hadn't done that since Jimmy Carter. You pay a price, as Zimbabwe's beginning to discover. That's the way to wealth. Zimbabwe would own the world today. And they say, well, we can't afford to make the dollar stable right now, strong right now. That's like saying with malaria, well, let's cure the disease before we deal with those pesky mosquitoes. First things first, strong and stable dollar, do sensible regulatory changes, reduce the tax burden on people and businesses, and this country will come back as it's always done before.
Okay, so here we are in a country where you say, you know, they'll always come back, the country will always come back, yet we are entering spooky nationalism kind of stuff. Our government is turned into the mob where they're telling businesses exactly what they can and can't do. They give this money out with any kind of thought whatsoever. I read a story today. GM says the best way to protect their business is to make sure that one of their subsidiaries or one piece of their business out down in Brazil doesn't shake apart. If it shakes apart down in Brazil, it's going to shake apart up here. So now they're taking the money that we lent them as the government, and they're using it to shore up their plants down in Brazil. This is the story I read today. Well, people aren't going to, they're going to go crazy when they hear stuff like that. But then that turns into protectionism, or the government saying, wait a minute, you can't do the things that you believe is in your best interest. How the hell do you run a company and bring the country back?
Well, you fight these things already now. Look at popular opinion. Why did this thing stall in the Senate? Why did all the House Republicans feel safe and a few Democrats to vote against this thing? People realize this is just a spending binge, taking every old spending bill that had been gathering dust for 10 years, pull it off the shelf and put it in a grab bag. That's all this is. And in terms of the American people, eventually they see it. Remember, the 1970s were a long, dreadful decade. Then we got Ronald Reagan in a 25-year period where America came roaring back again.
All right, Steve, thanks a lot. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Glenn.
You bet. Joining me now is Thomas Woods. He's the author of Meltdown. I have to tell you, I am such a loser. I spent the weekend, this is what I did. I read Meltdown, this one, and then I also read this one. This is fantastic as well. New Deal, Raw Deal. Wanted to get both of them on. Burton Folsom Jr. is the author of New Deal, Raw Deal, a new book exposing the myth that is FDR's New Deal. So let me start with, you know what, Thomas, let me start with you. I said earlier, maybe the best thing we should do is nothing at all. Can you make a case for that?
Well, historically, you can make an interesting case, theoretically and historically, but there's the case of the Great Depression of 1920, which no one's ever heard of, because the government at that time didn't do anything to try to get us out of it. So they did the exact opposite of what every Keynesian blockhead today tells us to do. They actually cut the government budget, so no fiscal stimulus, so-called. The Federal Reserve System did basically nothing. And here you have a depression that was worse in its first year than the first year of the Depression of 29. And yet, in no time, the economy was back on its feet, setting production records once again. All the bad malinvestments of the preceding boom were all cleared out, and you had a robust recovery. Whereas in 1929 and thereafter, what did you have? Tinker, 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 year after year after year. And regardless of the fact that in the media you hear even today that Herbert Hoover sat back and did nothing during the Great Depression. If only he had. Everything he did made it worse, so that in 1932, when FDR was running against him, his vice presidential nominee actually said, Hoover is leading the country down the road to socialism. Everybody knew he was intervening. And so year after year after year, you get this depression persists, you got double-digit unemployment. Maybe there's a lesson here. The one time the government said in American history, we're going to roll up our sleeves and solve this thing, the thing would not go away. They would not allow the recovery to take place.
Okay, hang on just a second. Did anybody see this from Newsweek? We're all socialists now. Really? I like this one. We're all socialists now except me, and I think the blue hand may be flipping the red hand off, but I'm not sure. We're all socialists now? Burton, let me go to you. I read your book this weekend, New Deal, Raw Deal, and I have to tell you, I didn't learn this in school. Everybody will say, oh, we need a new deal, something I warned about 2 years ago and said, oh, it's coming. Tell us why the new deal is really bad. Tell us about the New Deal.
Well, the New Deal was a disaster. We had massive federal spending, and after 6 years of this massive federal spending, we had doubled the national debt. Henry Morgenthau, who was Secretary of Treasury, said, hey, we've tried spending, and it does not work. He said this after the April 1939 unemployment statistics came in, and it was 20% unemployment.
Okay, I'm trying to figure out, guys, and maybe Thomas will go back to you. The roaring 20s came after the crash of the 1920s, and yet it was demonized. Exactly the same way that everything is being demonized, the rich are being demonized, but yet you say it really truly is the Fed that is causing this problem back then and now. Can you explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the great free market economists of the 20th century predicted pretty much what we're seeing. F.A. Hayek won the Nobel Prize in 1974 for basically saying that if you have a central bank like the Fed that's established by the government, has all these government-granted monopoly privileges, and it forces interest rates below the level that the free market would have set them, it sets the economy on an unsustainable boom. It sets investors out on investment trajectories that cannot be completed. There aren't enough resources to complete them. And so he predicted that there would be inevitably a bust, and a lot of these economists predicted that, of course, the bust would then be blamed on capitalism, as if it's the free market's fault that the government's crummy central bank forces interest rates below where the market would have set them. If we let the market set interest rates, you don't have these crazy asset bubbles. Meanwhile, we've had the Federal Reserve both in the 20s and today inflating these crazy bubbles, and now we've had probably the biggest asset bubble in world history, and they're all claiming they have no idea what caused it. I mean, talk about blockheads.
So, Burton, help me out. I'm a regular schmo, man. I mean this, and I apologize, America, but I'm a recovering alcoholic. I'm a former DJ, man. I mean, you couldn't get dumber than me. I'm a self-educated guy. After 9/11 happened, I decided to educate myself because of my children. I wanted to make sure I knew what was going on in the world. About 2 years ago, I started to look at the economy and saying, this isn't right, this isn't going to work. So I've tried to educate myself on the economy. When I read things like both of your book, as I read them this weekend, and I have done it so many times, I read the history of this country. Woodrow Wilson was a nightmare. FDR, not anything like what I thought he was and what's being taught at school. Burton, why are we not taught the truth?
Well, historians are committed to the idea that you need to centralize power in Washington, and that more things can be accomplished through centralized power than a decentralized system where private decision makers are spending their money as they see fit. What Tom said about the 1920s is true. In fact, we cut taxes in the 1920s. We had a top income tax rate in 1920 of 73%. Top marginal rate coming into the early 20s, and that helped explain why we had 12% unemployment in 1921. When Harding and Coolidge came in, they cut tax rates, and they had budget surpluses every year. We cut about 1/3 of the national debt in the 1920s. We reduced tax rates to a top marginal rate of 25%, and lo and behold, we're out of the Depression, and according to the League of Nations, we had the lowest unemployment rate of any nation, any Western nation they studied by 1929. Sounds like a pretty good recipe for success.
It's amazing. Thanks, gentlemen. If you want to see the similarities between FDR's New Deal, which prolonged the Depression, and Obama's stimulus package, wait until you see it. It's amazing. I mean, it's the same damn thing. Sign up for my free email newsletter at glennbeck.com. Get a special report from the Meltdown author, Thomas Woods, who was just on. It's free. It's at glennbeck.com. And tomorrow we're having Burton back to give the side-by-side comparison of this spending plan versus the New Deal. When you see what was done, you did not learn this in school. Don't miss it tomorrow. Late Friday afternoon, the Obama administration quietly lifted and moved the U.S. Census into the White House from the Commerce Department. Are you kidding me? Are we just playing games and getting ready for 2012? Is that what we're doing? Next. You know, on Friday, I promised you the trial of David Ogden, Deputy Attorney General nominee, in the We the People's Court. This man has spent years of his career defending pornographers, and now he could be the second in command at the Justice Department. His trial has been delayed until tomorrow due to executive order. Just saying. Oh, jeez. Here we go again. Oh, no, not capitalism isn't falling. Socialism? That's fine. I like so. Why aren't we stopping at socialism? Run for your life! Yeah, socialism seems all well and great. Here, I love this. I can't get over this. We're all socialists now. No, not me. No. The perils and the promise of the new era of government, big government. Oh, I can't wait to read it. The census headcount shapes the future of U.S. elections. The census tells us lots of things. Well, now, on Friday afternoon, I told you about 3:30 in the afternoon, Barack Obama decided that the White House is going to control that headcount. What's the big deal? Well, if it sounds wrong to you, you're not alone. I'm with you. With me now is Republican Utah Congressman Jason Chaffetz. He is a guy who his state lost out on a 4th House seat after the 2000 census came out. And this really is much more frightening than it sounds. This is really politics at its worst. Is it not, Congressman?
Oh, it really is. It's a stunning political land grab. The administration hasn't even been in office for 20 days, and they're already moving out of the Commerce Department, the census, and putting it into the White House. Rahm Emanuel is famous for his political trickery, and it's just unbelievable. Isn't there something else more important for the White House to be doing than grabbing this bit of landscape?
So you understand, America, this is what this means, and correct me if I'm wrong, Congressman. What this means is, first of all, let's just make this George Bush so people can understand. George Bush decides to have the census done by Karl Rove. Karl Rove, I'm just going to count a bunch of people over here and see what's going on. So he just counts the heads, you know, Karl Rove, I've seen him with his whiteboard. He can count. He counts everybody, but he finds a few more people in the states that are favorable to him, because now we don't actually have to do a head count anymore. We just we use some mathematical figures. Then what happens? The Electoral College changes, the representation in Congress, and if I'm not mistaken, Congressman, doesn't the money for welfare and states and everything else, isn't that also tied to the census?
All the political formulas about how all this aid gets to all these states is based on that census. And it's very telling that less than 20 days into the administration, they grabbed this thing and put it right in the chief political officer's hands in Rahm Emanuel. It's just fundamentally wrong. It should be independent, and it should be in the Commerce Department, as it has been throughout the course of time. And you're right. If the Republicans had done this, I guarantee there'd be outrage, and I'd like to think I'd be upset about that too. But we've got Senator Gregg, who's now hopefully going to be confirmed, be the Secretary of Commerce. And we ought to employ the trust in him, just like we did when the Bush administration put Norm Mineta into transportation.
You know what, Congressman?
It's just about counting.
We've had you on the program now twice, and I know I've had you on the radio program before. And quite honestly, I'm having you on because I have a new theory. I don't think I'm going to take any more of the apples from the barrel. I'm going to start picking them from the tree. I'm going to start listening to the freshman class because you guys, hopefully, you haven't been corrupted yet. But what is it like to be sitting there as a freshman and seeing these master game players while the world is on fire? Both sides just playing games. You know what? Here's what I want to know, Congressman. I would like to have names of the people who are against this stimulus bill, you know, unless they get a pig crap museum.
Yeah, exactly. I want to meet the congressmen and women that are signing up for this crap and this pork and these. I mean, I am so fired up to be here. I am so glad, and I will come in and name names, and I will Twitter this out, and I will put it on Facebook, and I will let everybody know who's doing what.
Congressman, you get the names, and we'll expose them here on the. You
Very good.
Help rat it out, man. We're living in dangerous, dangerous times. If people like you don't stand up soon. Thanks a lot.
Oh, thanks, Glenn.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, we go to Judge Napolitano. He's Fox senior judicial analyst. Hey, Judge, how are you?
Good, Glenn. This situation is far worse than the congressman has even indicated. There's a couple of things here people need to realize. And one is when the Commerce Department does something, it has to publish its rules, publish its regulations, and the Congress can accept or reject those rules or regulations. The White House can operate legally in a lot more secrecy. It doesn't have to publish the rules. It doesn't have to publish the regulations. You may say, well, what's the big deal? There's two ways to count heads in the inner city. One is to knock on doors and find out who lives there. The other is to estimate the number of people who live block by block. That is what Rahm Emanuel wants to do. And there'll be no way to check or to correct that estimation.
Judge, you know what? Tell me who's going to be the first to pick up pitchforks. Is it going to be those people that lost their 401k? I just made this note before I went on the air. The lost the 401k and their pensions and their homes and their jobs. The little guy, the entrepreneur that was just trying to do the right thing, but now is being crushed by giant government corporations. Or the blue-collar people that lost their homes and their jobs, their credit cards were maxed out because they did the patriotic thing. You know, they went out and spent and they shopped. They worked hard. They were like, okay, I guess the stimulus is okay. Or is it going to be the 20-somethings that couldn't go to college because they could no longer afford it, or as many as half of the colleges they say are going to be closing down soon because they won't have it. Their future is stolen. Or is it going to be the extreme left or the extreme right that feels like government has been out of control? Who's the first to snap if these people keep playing games like this, Judge?
It's going to be a lot of people who have just had it up to here with the government. Let me tell you, the backstory on this census thing, as if the Democrats don't have enough control of Congress. They want to give full congressional representation to the District of Columbia. They want to give it a representative in Congress, and they want to give it 2 senators. And in order to do that, they're going to give Congressman Chaffetz his additional congressional seat in Utah. The Republicans will be happy they have that additional seat, but the Trojan horse will be in the Congress.
Wait a minute. In what part of the Constitution does somebody get 2 senators and you're not a state?
Glenn, the Constitution says only states shall send representatives, but this Congress is going to pass legislation that declares the District of Columbia, quote, the functional equivalent of a state.
Unbelievable. Okay, imagine somebody blew up a bomb, killing 17 Americans, and now that person could walk free even though we know who it is and we know he was involved. How could it happen? Next. So I get to work, it's about 6:30 in the morning, and I think I still have frosting on my face because I've been eating cupcakes, as you can tell. And one of my researchers says, do you know why Iran launched this satellite into space? It's another sign of the apocalypse. And I said, Well, good morning to you, too. I'll give you the details in just a second. You're going to need frosting. First, the headlines from Fox Central now with Patty Ann Brown. Hi, Patty.
Doom and gloom, gloom and doom.
No, I just want to have cupcakes. That's all I want. The world won't leave me alone.
You have a right to your cupcakes, I have to say. The doom and gloom can wait. In the news right now, here's what's happening. A crucial vote now underway on the Senate floor that could lead to a vote on President Obama's economic recovery plan tomorrow. Senators are holding a cloture vote to force the end of debate on their $827 billion version of the stimulus package. A passage of the bill will likely set up tough negotiations with the House. The vote comes just hours before the president holds his first primetime news conference. Mr. Obama hoped to finish a signed stimulus bill by February 16th, but that deadline is growing more challenging by the day. And finally, baseball's highest paid player now admits he did use steroids after all. New York Yankees third baseman Alex Rodriguez tells ESPN he used performance-enhancing drugs between 2001 and 2003 when he was with the Texas Rangers. The admission comes 2 days after a Sports Illustrated report came out accusing him of using steroids. And those are your headlines. I'm Patty Ann Brown. Glenn Beck returns in a moment. But first, Brett Baer has a preview of what's on Special Report tonight. Hey, Brett.
Hey, Patty Ann, coming up, the president pitches the stimulus plan to a town that needs jobs. Why is the census becoming Washington's newest political football? And why could it cost $2 trillion to fix the nation's water system? Join me at the top of the hour, 6 Eastern, for Special Report.
Just busy reading about how we're all socialists now. Last week on this program, I told you President Obama stopped the trial of a dirtbag who was blamed for the masterminding the USS Cole bombing and killing 17 American servicemen, who really, it's time to close the door on this case. Well, now there's a chance that this terrorist could walk away free. Why? You're going to love this one. The new Attorney General Eric Holder says that waterboarding is torture, and the CIA has admitted that this terrorist is one of the suspects that was waterboarded. Legally, anything this man said while being waterboarded is inadmissible. Great. In Richmond is Arthur Herman. He's the author and former history professor at George Mason and Georgetown Universities. He wrote an op-ed about this today in the New York Post. Arthur, help me out on this. Please tell me that this is not going to happen.
Say it ain't so. Well, I don't know if it's not so, but I'll tell you this. The chances are very likely that if Ahmad al-Rahim al-Naziri gets the right attorney, that he's going to be able to walk away from this, not just because of the way in which he was treated in terms of waterboarding, if that actually does get designated as being torture, but also because of the length of time that it's taken to build this case against him in the military tribunals, which have now been shut down and now been closed down by presidential order.
Okay, here's the thing.
So they're going to have to start all over.
Right. We talked about this last week on this program. I said, well, wait a minute. You have a constitutional right to a speedy trial. If the president comes in now while they're ready to go to trial and says, no, you know what, we're not going to do that. If I were the judge and Ahmed dirtbag comes into my courtroom, I say to him, you know what? He had a right to a speedy trial. This is a violation of the Constitution. Even I would let the guy go because I believe in the Constitution. How is this possible? What is the
problem?
Go ahead.
And here's the problem, as any judge will tell you, is that when you start now having to rebuild the case from scratch with a whole new set of rules about what's evidence. We don't know what those rules are because no new system has been set up to carry out these kinds of trials of Guantanamo detainees.
Okay.
Then we're looking at perhaps another 4 to 5 years. And in that case, I think it's going to be unlikely that anything is ever going to happen.
Commander, thank you very much, Arthur. I appreciate it. We want to go to retired U.S. Navy Commander Kirk Lippold. He was at the helm of the USS Cole when it was attacked. He was supposed to be with us Friday when there was a misunderstanding at the White House. He's now with militaryfamiliesunited.org, and these are not just faceless victims. Hull technician, second-class Kenneth Clodfelter, was 21 years old when he was serving you and me. He was killed in the attack. His father made a pledge at the funeral. He said to him exactly what you or I would have said. You're not going to be forgotten, son. The USS Cole will never be forgotten. Yet it seems that it has been forgotten. His father, John Clodfelter, and Commander Lippold met with President Obama on Friday. Commander, let me Let me start with you. Can you describe the scene a little bit? When you walked into the White House, you were there with 9/11 victims, families, and it had to be a little tense when you were waiting for the president to come in.
In fact, it was, Glenn. The feeling in the room was one of a lot of anxiety. There was a bit of anger, some mistrust, quite frankly, because the families felt blindsided. The president had made a series of decisions his first day in office regarding Guantanamo Bay and had never consulted with the families regarding what he was going to do with the detention center or the detainees. So a lot of them, while upset, were willing to extend the president an olive branch and at least be willing to hear him out and hear what he had to say during that meeting. Okay,
and John, you have your son. I think you have a picture of him. I know I have a picture here on my desk of your son. When you walked in, I read an interview with you that you said you wanted to tell him off. What was bubbling and coursing through you when he walked in the room?
Just a whole lot of anger. I mean, I was so angry when I had heard that, in fact, that they were going to go ahead and drop the charges, because everybody got the impression that these people were going to be set free. And now I read an article in a local magazine up in Washington that, in fact, President Saleh in Yemen is getting ready to go ahead and get up to 92 of his people back, you know, from the detention center.
Oh, yeah. So when you walked out of the White House, you were supposed to be on this program, were you feeling better? What did he say to you?
I was feeling a whole lot better because, in fact, he had indicated that they wanted to go ahead and find out what was going on, you know, down there in Gitmo. And the main thing being is that, hey, you know, it should not take 8 or 9 years to be able to prosecute these people or just to go ahead and have a preliminary hearing on them. I mean, 8 or 9 years is just too darn long to be able to bring these people to justice.
Commander,
what to date?
Go ahead. I'm sorry, John. Go ahead. Finish your sentence.
I mean, these people have just been given too much time by our own government.
Yeah. Commander, what reason did the president give to you?
He said that the military commissions process down there was flawed, and that basically he wanted to have this 120-day pause so that we could review what was going on down there and how to best go forward.
You're a commander. If I'm not mistaken, you were one of the guys who helped set up Gitmo, or were part of the team. What did he explain? What was flawed?
He did not explain. I think that what he is looking at is trying to figure out how the legal process can be revised in order to make it, as he put it, bulletproof through the Supreme Court. The only problem that I have with that is that, you know, you have to look at it this way, Glenn. No matter what we try and do, the process needed to move forward. We needed to continue to go with the trials. To justice delayed is justice denied. These families have already waited 8 years for justice to be brought for killing 17 of their sons, daughters, wives, and husbands.
You know,
and we just need to keep moving forward with it.
I've got 30 seconds. Let me just ask both of you guys for a yes or no here. I mean, the 9/11 families have been consulted every step of the way. They've been brought in. We care. But yet, we care also about the USS Cole, and every step of the way, you guys haven't been brought into this process. Have you had it up to here just a little bit? Would you like to see some justice done eventually? Sooner the better?
Sooner is
yes,
better.
I would.
And I was very pleased.
Okay. Thank you very much. And, John, thank you for the sacrifice that your family has made. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you, Dale.
You bet. We'll talk to you again. Now, Iran is chasing prophecy, and it could be disastrous for the whole world. Chief, do we have to start Monday like this? I mean, come on. I'll explain in a minute. This story just may make you want to go to the mountains. You know, just move away. You know, with that little snuggle bear or something. Last week, Iran launched their first domestically built telecommunications satellite into space, and it was like, oh, wow, look, they can have phone service now. Can you hear me now? The rocket that carried the satellite into space was named something Saphir. I don't know what that means. And the satellite was named Omid. I don't know what that means. Well, today, somebody had to harsh my mellow and tell me exactly what it means, and it ain't good. Former senior aide to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Joel Rosenberg, joins me now. He's also the author of a great book, Epicenter 2.0. Okay, Mr. Gloom and Doom, you believe, I mean, this is where, America, this is where we go crazy. You believe that we may be living in the end of days.
Well, as an evangelical Christian, yeah,
Okay.
there's a lot of evidence for that.
Okay.
I don't want to bring it about, however. That's the difference between me and Mr. Ahmadinejad.
Yes, okay. Tell me about the two thresholds quickly. What are the two thresholds that they've just crossed over and around?
Absolutely. Well, there's two red lines that the United States and Israel has been deeply worried about Iran would cross. First, that they would be able to build a intercontinental ballistic missile, therefore able to reach Europe and the United States.
Got it.
And that they could complete the nuclear fuel cycle and actually build a workable nuclear bomb.
Okay, now here's the problem. And you know, you and I have talked about this for a couple of years, and this actually started with me going and listening to the speeches of Ahmadinejad at the UN, and nobody ever reported on this. And this stuff just jumped out at me, where he said, and oh, Allah, at the end of his speeches, each time he said, "Oh Allah, give me the strength to hasten the return of the promised one." And I remember hearing that, and I said to one of the guys next to me, "Who's the promised one, and what does he have to do to hasten it?" I started looking into
Not Obama.
It's not Obama. It is, the promised one is the 12th Imam. America, you need to hear this, because whether you believe in this nut job or not, he believes it, or he's just a politician using religion. Either way, this is why Iran, and this is what everybody misses, this is why Iran is dangerous. Quickly, in 60 seconds, tell me who the 12th Imam is.
Well, as I wrote about in the book Epicenter, the 12th Imam is the Messiah. It's the Islamic Messiah, whom Shia Muslims, not Sunni Muslims, but the Shia Muslims of Iran and Saudi Arabia, or not Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, believe will come back in the end of days. But in order to bring about this Islamic Messiah, the Mahdi, the 12th Imam, Islamic leaders need to hasten his coming by destroying the little Satan, Israel, and the great Satan, the United States. And this is what's dangerous, is because these leaders of Iran currently, not all the people of Iran, but the leaders actually believe they need to create bloody carnage, the death of millions of people, in order to create the conditions for the Mahdi to bring peace.
I mean, it's an M&M. You're talking about, hey, yeah, so anyway, we're just going to, you know, we're just going to bring chaos to the Middle East and wash the world in blood. And then the Mahdi comes back and rules from ancient Babylon. M&M? Yeah. We'll be back with more in a second, because wait till you hear what the name of the missile was, or the rocket, and the satellite. It all ties together in a spooky sort of way. Next. So here we are, we're just, you know, talking about Jesus coming back at any time, and having a good time talking about it, because they think it has to be really ugly for him to come back, and that's the idea in Iran with some of the crazy people that run that country. At least, if they don't believe it, they're pretending to believe it to whip their people up into a frenzy.
All right, a distinction here. We're not talking about Jesus.
No.
Evangelicals want Jesus to come
if
back.
I'm not mistaken,
it's the Mahdi in Iran. That's who they're looking for, this Islamic Messiah. Different.
If I may,
yes?
If you look at the extremist Muslim version of the Mahdi, and then you read the book of Revelation, he suspiciously looks like the Antichrist.
That would be closer.
Yeah.
That would be closer.
Seeing that he's the one running a one-world government and executing everybody that disagrees with him from Babylon. I don't know where I heard that one before. But he's the good guy to Iran.
Iran, right.
So they launched this missile. It has a communication rocket. Yeah, it has a communication satellite on it. Why is this important, and explain the two names?
Well, the rocket is a two-stage rocket called the Safer, which means message. So it's sending a message.
Yeah.
It's not then the satellite itself is called Omid, which is hope. It's a message of hope.
Maybe they're hoping for change. Just saying.
They're hoping for this Mahdi to come. And what Ahmadinejad, the president of Iran, wants is to send the world a message that Iran is rapidly closing in on the technology to create the conditions of genocide that would allow the Messiah to reappear.
Right. Because they have to. These guys, 12ers is what they're called, which Ahmadinejad is. They're so dangerous that even the Ayatollah Khomeini
outlawed them completely.
Right.
They're too nuts.
Because if you're saying something. The guy who's,
the Khomeini people,
I mean, he's, they drop him out of his coffin. I mean, and he's saying, no, these guys are too crazy over here. These are really dangerous people. This is the thing that I hope Barack Obama understands. This is why people say you can't negotiate with the people in Iran. The people you can. The leadership in Iran are full-fledged nuts. Tomorrow will you come back and talk about, because they are setting up, and I'm not saying that, this is the end times or anything like that. What I'm saying is they are telling their people that these are the end of days, setting them up for something, and there's something about the Persian Gulf turning blood red, and that is now happening, or at least that's what they're saying in their papers. So don't miss tomorrow's episode. Oh, it's another fun. Be afraid. Be very afraid. And also don't forget, you're not alone. A word from Captain Sully next.
It was amazing. It was crucial. It was life-saving, literally.
What would you like to say to those folks?
Thank you seems totally inadequate. I have a debt of gratitude I fear I may never be able to repay.
To those rescue workers.
To the first responders, to all of them.
This is the guy that I would want as our Treasury Secretary, honest to God. What a good guy. The pilot who landed the plane on the Hudson, Captain Sully, was on 60 Minutes last night, heaping praise on other people. While the rest of the world calls him a hero, he's calling the rest of the world that. In a world that sometimes can drive you crazy, here's a man who shows you you're not alone. There's one sane person out there. He showed at least one of the 9 principles in our Not Alone project, and I have been asking you, if you just agree with 7 out of the 9 principles, email a picture of yourself to wesurroundthem@foxnews.com. This is a first step, and we've got some really great things that we have planned for you in the next few weeks. It's just taking a lesson from our founding fathers. I found this over the weekend. This is the first known political cartoon in U.S. history. Benjamin Franklin made it. Do we have it? There it is. He made it. It was first urging the colonies to come together against the French, but then it became a rallying cry during the Revolution. And I learned a lot about this snake over the weekend as I was reading up on it. I decided to use this as our logo for our 9 principles and our You're Not Alone project. We say unite or die. And these are the 9 principles that can unite us. That America is a good place. That we believe in God and He is the center of our lives. That we have to try to be a better, more honest person than we were yesterday. That our family is sacred. That I and my spouse are the ultimate authority under God when it comes to my family. How about this principle? If you break the law, you're going to pay the penalty. Justice is blind and no one is above it. Or, I have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but that is not a guarantee of equal results. That's why the knot's there in the snake. I work hard for what I have, and I will share it with others, but when I choose, should I choose, and with whom I choose. Government cannot force me to be charitable. And this one, it's not un-American for anyone to disagree with my opinion, but my opinion, or others' opinions, may be anti-American. And the last one on the cut-up snake is, the government works for me, not the other way around. We've had such a huge reaction to the You're Not Alone project. So many agree with at least 7 of the 9 principles. I want to share one of the letters that have come in. This comes in from Joanne Case, Webster, New York. She says, I'm not computer savvy, so just make a stick picture of a hip great-grandmother who wants to leave a wonderful legacy of God, country, and love to her children and grandchildren and great-grandson. Joe, we have this picture we did. I mean, that looks pretty hip. Huh? We did that. It took all day. I know, we're doing a lot of work if you watch the show. We'll cover all of this and a lot more on my radio show tomorrow. If you live in the New York area, you can hear my show now weekday mornings from 9 to 11 on News Talk 710 WOR. If you live in someplace sane, you can find an affiliate near you by going to glennbeck.com. Thanks so much for watching. By the way, TiVo, the